Let's have a look at some of my finished watercolor artwork. I've been having a lot of fun lately working on these small watercolor and pastel sunflowers on paper. I've been sharing some of them on my Instagram page and some glimpses of my process. Today, I wanted to show you a little longer version of how I make these paintings. For this process today, I'm using my watercolor paintings as a reference to look at as I work. First, I would call it a gesture drawing of the flowers to see where I want them to be, which way I want them to be facing, their size. I'm just taking note of that. And I like to kind of use these sketchy marks for the petals and also the leaves. It's just to help me know when I start painting which direction I'm actually wanting the flowers to face. Now that the sketch is finished or the drawing, I start setting up my palette for the lighter colors first. I'm adding a little bit of pigment to the water, and I'm also adding a unified color. It's a unified palette, so I'm adding, I think it's Naples yellow to each of the wells on the palette, and then I go back in and then I start painting. Since these are more expressive loose flowers, I make sure to hold my brush towards the end as I'm working. I think I do that a lot. I don't want to say all the time, but I do that a lot when I'm working. I hold my tools all the way back, almost towards the tip, and this helps me to have a more impressionist or expressive mark or stroke when I'm painting or even when I'm drawing. It helps me to remember to keep my brush strokes loose, flowing, and relaxed. It really took me quite a while to start this process of painting my sunflowers. I I'm not sure why, but it was a lot of resistance to getting going with this. I don't want to call it a collection, but it's just something that I'm doing as part of my year of painting challenge. And I was really glad when I broke through and I just kept working. And before I knew it, I had painted, I would say, at least 20 paintings. And I'm not talking about the smaller ones. I had made some bigger paintings too with sunflowers. And it's really been a interesting process of how once I got over the resistance to whatever it was, I don't know, maybe because I don't typically paint sunflowers, but once I got through that resistance and just said, I'm just going to do my best and make it how I want it to look, not like everyone else's, not even realistic, but just the essence of the flower, the essence of what I'm doing, and then add my little bit of style or personality to my work after I let go of expectations or worry about how to make the artwork. I really just got into a rhythm of painting these almost every day. Yeah, definitely. I had to think for a minute. I was definitely working on them, whether they were really small or larger on larger paper. I worked on them pretty much every day, and it's been interesting to see how I went from very controlled and almost afraid to mess up type of look to how I'm painting them now, more expressive and fun and just doing what feels right for that painting. I think that's what helped me is getting into the flow of work and then just doing what felt right for that painting. Each one looked similar but had its own little personality. And I started to think of them as like little groups of, I don't want to say people, but like little characters. Like they all had their own little way that they face and how I drew the petals or painted the petals. I started thinking of them almost like little characters. And so that also helped. So I guess what I'm saying is if you're facing like that type of resistance when you're working, um, if you paint at all or if you draw, if you're facing that type of resistance, just do your best and be gentle with yourself and just practice with even things that are like craft supplies or something. Don't get too rigid or worried. Just do what feels right for each painting. Each one might look similar. You might be painting, I don't know, your pets, and you want it to look a certain way. But sometimes you have to like tap in and go with what you feel is needed for that particular painting. And it might surprise you how doing that gives you confidence to go forward and keep working and developing as you go. So now in the process, I'm going in and adding in some darker paint to add a little more value and depth. And I do this over and over. So I will set it aside, work on another painting, come back to it after it dries a little so that I can continue to adjust things to how I want it to look. Here I changed my mind about the green that I had added to this stem, but watching it back, I was like, it was a perfect color green for that stem, but I didn't think so at the time. So I just soaked it up and I blended another color for that stem to add some more value and detail. As I was working on these paintings, I really got into the process like mentally, like it's almost like meditative. It feels very calming and relaxing. I'm not sure if it's mixing the water with the paint or the um the slow pace of my work right now, but it's something that feels right for the moment in my life, and I'm really glad that I had time to make these paintings and also that I get a chance to set up some times and share a longer version of how I make my artwork. And it gives me a chance to show how I make my work and encourage other people to make their artwork in their own way and at their own pace. So I look at it as a chance to encourage other people who are creative to embrace their own way of doing things and their own way of expressing themselves. When I'm just about finished with my paintings, I typically like to add splatters and fix any of the details I want to change, or maybe at this point, sometimes I'll add a little bit more collage or mixed media. But for these, I kept it really simple so that it would be easy to follow what I was doing. And I definitely try to push my values also at this point. I'm calling these finished for this painting session. Now I just wanted to share some of the paintings that I chose for the print shop. This is actually a whole other part of my creative process when I choose images for the print shop. And then I go through the process of taking the photos or scanning. And after they're scanned, they have to be edited and then uploaded and labeled for the shop. And I chose out of the many that I painted, I chose some and I made a collection. And I was super excited because it was so hard to get past that resistance in order to create these. I didn't tell anybody I was working on that, but I'm so glad that it worked out. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you liked seeing that video. Don't forget to give me a like if you liked it, and I'll see you next time.